plague of darkness. The plague of darkness. What's that all about? So, I don't know if you ever had this experience, but I've had this experience before. I'll give you a couple of examples that talk to me. I was once on a ride in an amusement park. And I was on a ride in an amusement park. And welcome, Leon. I was on a ride in an amusement park. And it was Disneyland. The ride was in the black, in the dark. That's where the ride was taking place, most of the ride. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the ride stops in the middle of the ride. Now, it was a little bit, concerning. It wasn't that we weren't very up high, but it was a ride. It was nonetheless a ride. They could move quick, and we were wondering, like, what's going on? What's wrong? We didn't hear any flashing lights or any emergency callings. It was probably about 20 years ago, so I don't know if they had all the emergency, things in place that they have today. And we were stuck there for about an hour. It wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel secure and safe in that environment. If you're ever hiking and you miscalculate the time of when you have to get back, and it starts getting dark, and once it's going to get dark, you're going to have no way to see where you're going, and you're in the middle of the woods. And the darkness of the woods could be pitch black. Kind of, you go to the country sometimes, and you go outside, the dark is a much stronger dark than here it is, in the city. It's like pitch black. You really, really can't even see it. You feel like it's like a deadly darkness. So the next plague was God destroying the power of light, right? So let's go through this again. The water was destroyed. Their food with the frogs destroyed. Their bodies with the lice and the boils were destroyed. Patrolling the streets were the wild animals. Their animals died. All their other livestock died. The hail was the weather. The grasshoppers was their crops. And now it's their light. God takes away their light from them. And they sit 3 days in complete darkness where they can't see a thing. Imagine wearing the most darkest blindfold possible and try to function. You, your spouse, your kids. Imagine how school would be back at that time. You think they would cancel school? You think de Blasio would cancel school? Right? Would there be no Zoom options? Literally crazy. And then God made it even more difficult. A higher level. Not just their light, their movement. God stopped their ability to move. And they were paralyzed for the next 3 days. So 3 days of darkness, pitch black, then an additional 2 days of darkness plus the inability to move. So now literally everything was taken away from them, was crushed, except for their lives. So this was an extremely powerful plague. And again, really at this point, you would think they would cave in and agree, get the Jews out of here. But Pharaoh is still stubborn, not letting them go. And I told you yesterday, I think, that the reason he didn't let them go was God hardened his heart and didn't give him the choice anymore. So he should see the greatness of God. It should be internalized by Pharaoh once and for all, and actually the rest of the world that was witnessing these great plagues. People from the rest of the world were hearing about what's going on. Now, I want to just change the topics for a moment in the plague of darkness and bring out a most magnificent insight and very practical point to today even. Relevant to our time right before the Mashiach and our merit to hopefully be there when Mashiach comes. There is a medrash, a commentary that explains to us that during the plague of darkness, it's only one opinion, but it's an opinion, 80% of the Jews died. So if there were 3 million Jews roughly that got out of Egypt, so at least let's just say the men, 600,000 were men. So times that by 5, right? That would be about 3 million men. So 4/5, 80% of the men died. 2.4 million Jews died during that plague. Why? God didn't want the Egyptians to see the Jews also dying. So he killed the Jews. They all died during this plague of darkness. So the non-Jews wouldn't realize the Jews are also dying. Because if they would see the Jews dying, they would say, well, you see the Jews also are dying. It's affecting all of us. Okay, that's the point. That's the story. Now let's try to understand this. Why did 80% of the Jews die? What was wrong with them? Why couldn't they go out? So I want to make a couple more points, and then we'll try to tie it all together. It's a very important question. There is another medrash, another commentator, that explains that when we were in Egypt, we were on the 49th level of impurity. And that level of impurity was so great, how we reached the 50th level of impurity, there's no return. The Jewish nation would be lost, we would all be lost. It's too much impure to get out of. Now, I have a very, very big question on that. Think about it like this. The past entire year, the Jews witnessed miraculous plagues against the Egyptians. Their water turned to blood, the frogs were all over the place, the lice, their bodies, their animals were roaming the streets, their livestock died, everything, right? The hail. So wouldn't you be a believer now? Wouldn't you become stronger? Wouldn't you be somebody that would be moving up the ladder of Judaism, closer to God? How could you still be at the 49th level, not moving, and if anything, moving the wrong direction? More so, some of the rabbis say that had they stayed there an extra few moments in Egypt, they would have reached the 50th level. That's how bad it was. So 1 second, are we going up or down? And we should be going up, not down. So what was going on? How come if we would have stayed there an extra moment or two, we would have been at the 50th level of impurity, which would have been terrible? We should be going up. Very powerful question. I'm going to add one more question. And the question is like this. Hashem tells us that he is so thankful, and he remembers the kindness we did for him by following him into the wilderness. God is so thankful, of such gratitude to us, that we followed him into the wilderness. Now let me ask you a question. If you were in Egypt, and you were a slave, and you saw all these miracles, would it be so difficult to follow God to the wilderness? I think I would go. It sounds like the better option that I see. Yeah, the wilderness, I don't know. It's an unknown. I know I'm supposed to go to Israel. It's, I think, better than Egypt. So why is that such a great kindness that we listen to God, that God so has such gratitude to us that we followed him into the wilderness? So I think this is the answer. And there's two parts to the answer. We'll start like this. You see, seeing miracles is great. But does it actually change your life into reality? See, any Jew during the plagues of Egypt definitely admitted and saw the greatness of God. But now, are you going to be, truthful to your mind and to your heart and say, well, I know that God is God, and therefore I'll take action and follow into a place that I don't know where I'm going? Or I'd rather be in a place that I at least know what it's all about. Would I take God and the unknown, or stay in the slavery of Egypt, but the comfort zone? So even after all the miracles, there was still, by many, many Jews, the majority of Jews, an uncertainty about actually putting into action what they knew. Putting into action, following God, packing up your belongings, and going out of Egypt. And that uncertainty is the great gratitude that God adds towards us, that we actually followed him into the wilderness. That great uncertainty, that we followed him. With this, we can understand perhaps what the 50th level of impurity is. Perhaps the 50th level of impurity was the inability for someone to make that decision to leave Egypt. They saw God, and they'll take God in Egypt, and they'll serve God in Egypt. but the inability to ever get out of Egypt because of the fear of following God, taking that action into the wilderness that they couldn't do. And perhaps even if you're going up the ladder and you see the spirituality and you're connecting more with God, if you cannot reach the level of being able to leave Egypt and having that level of trust in God, you would reach the 50th level when it's time to go and you don't go. If you would not go at that moment when everyone is leaving and you would stay back, that's the 50th level of impurity, because you have no way out. And therefore, the Jews that were not able to, that God saw or foresaw, were not going to be able to go out. God said, you know what? I'm going to take their lives now before they reach that level of no return. And I'll kill them during the plague of darkness so the Egyptians don't see it. And therefore, these Jews will never be lost for eternity. They'll be able to be reincarnated, right? They'll be able to come back in a different form, in a different neshama, in a different body, and fix up their mistakes. They'll still be able to have a connection of their soul in the bigger world. But once you reach the 50th level, there's no return. So God did not allow these Jews to get to the point of leaving Egypt and deciding not to go, because that would have been the 50th level. Therefore, God went ahead and took their lives now, which was the better of the two options. At the same time, for us who went out, Baruch Hashem, amazing. There was a great gratitude to God. God has great thanks for us that we did that. And as well, it was the way that even though we were going up, had we stayed there a moment longer, we would have reached the 50th level of impurity, which would obviously have been very, very, devastating.